In the next 30 minutes, you'll learn to talk about the past in Spanish. And we'll do this in the same way that native Spanish speakers do. In other words, you'll learn the patterns they use to build sentences, so that it all sounds completely authentic and natural. Make sure you download the coursebook that accompanies this series. There's a link to it in the description box below. And finally, whenever I ask you a question, make sure you pause the video to say your answer out loud and then continue. Let's begin. To express I wanted, the sound in Spanish is quería, quería. And the verb to rest is descansar. So we have 3 syllables in this verb. Descansar. How would you say I wanted to rest? Quería descansar. To express a little, the sound is un poco, un poco. How would you say I wanted to rest a little? Quería descansar un poco. To express before, it would be antes de, antes de. And the verb to go out or going out is salir, salir. How would you say before going out? Antes de salir. Now try this. I wanted to rest a little before going out. Quería descansar un poco antes de salir. To express I was, the sound is estaba, estaba. And the word for tired is cansado or cansada. If you are male, you will end with the O sound, cansado. However, for a female, you will end with cansada. How would you say I was tired? Estaba cansado or estaba cansada. The word for and is very simple in Spanish. It's simply y, spelled with a Y. Y. How would you say I was tired and I wanted to rest? Estaba cansado or cansada y quería descansar. The word for yesterday is ayer, ayer. How would you say, yesterday I was tired and I wanted to rest a little? Ayer estaba cansado o cansada y quería descansar un poco. Do you remember the verb to go out or going out? Salir. And what about before? Antes de. So how would you say before going out? Antes de salir. Now try this. Yesterday I was tired and I wanted to rest a little before going out. Ayer estaba cansado o cansada y quería descansar un poco antes de salir. The verb to stay in Spanish is formed by 2 parts. First of all, we take the verb quedar, which means to remain, quedar. And onto the end of that, we put the pronoun of me. So the sound becomes quedarme. Now, this literally means to remain myself. However, we use it for to stay, quedarme. How would you say I wanted to stay. Quería quedarme. To express more or for longer, you would simply add the sound of más. Más. How would you say, yesterday, I wanted to stay for longer? Ayer quería quedarme más. To express a little longer, it would be un poquito más. Un poquito más. So how would you say, yesterday, I wanted to stay a little longer? Ayer quería quedarme un poquito más. If we wanted to express I was in a hurry, first of all you take the sound for I was, which is estaba, and onto that we will add the sound of apurado or apurada. Let's break the syllables up. So we have either apurado or apurada. Just as before, if you are male, you will end with the o and say apurado. However, as a female, you will say apurada. So the full expression becomes estaba apurado or apurada. This stands for I was in a hurry. The word for but is pero. Pero. So how would you say, but I was in a hurry? Pero estaba apurado or apurada. Now try this. Yesterday, I wanted to stay longer, but I was in a hurry. Ayer quería quedarme más, pero estaba apurado o apurada. To express I couldn't, meaning I wasn't able to, the sound in Spanish is no pude. No pude. How would you say, but I couldn't, meaning but I wasn't able to? Pero no pude. Let's try this. I wanted to stay longer, but I couldn't. Quería quedarme más, pero no pude. The word for because is porque. Porque. Do you remember how to say I was in a hurry? Estaba apurado or apurada. Now try this. Yesterday, I wanted to stay longer, but I couldn't because I was in a hurry. Ayer quería quedarme más, pero no pude porque estaba apurado or apurada. The verb to wait is esperar. Esperar. How would you say, but I couldn't wait? Pero no pude esperar. To express, but I couldn't wait any longer, you simply put más onto the end. How would you do that? Pero no pude esperar más. In order to express to wait for you, what happens is we take the verb of esperar and we tag on the pronoun of te. The te stands for you. So it's literally like saying await you. The sound becomes esperarte. Esperarte. To await you. How would you say I couldn't wait for you? No pude esperarte. Once again, what's the sound for I wanted? Quería. So how would you say, I wanted to wait for you? Quería esperarte. But I couldn't. Pero no pude. Now try this. I wanted to wait for you, but I couldn't. Quería esperarte, pero no pude. How would you say, because I was in a hurry? Porque estaba apurado or apurada. So let's try this. I wanted to wait for you, but I couldn't because I was in a hurry. Quería esperarte, pero no pude porque estaba apurado o apurada. Once again, what's the verb to stay, meaning to remain myself? Quedarme. So how would you say, I wanted to stay, but I couldn't? Quería quedarme, pero no pude. Do you remember how to express a little more or a little longer? Un poquito más. Let's try this. I wanted to stay a little longer, but I was in a hurry yesterday. Quería quedarme un poquito más, pero estaba apurado or apurada ayer. Do you remember the word for tired? Cansado or cansada. Now say, I couldn't because I was tired. No pude porque estaba cansado o cansada. Do you remember the verb to rest? Descansar. How would you say, I wanted to rest? Quería descansar. To express, I just wanted to rest, you use the sound of solo, solo, and you put it at the front of the sentence. So, I just wanted to rest would become solo quería descansar. The word for last night is anoche, anoche. So how would you say, last night I was tired and I just wanted to rest? Anoche estaba cansado o cansada y solo quería descansar. If we have quería meaning I wanted, then the sound of no quería means I didn't want. No quería. How would you say, I didn't want to go out last night. I just wanted to rest. No quería salir anoche. Solo quería descansar. In order to express I had to, the sound in Spanish is tuve que. Tuve que. How would you say I had to go out? Tuve que salir. The verb to stand in line is hacer cola, literally to make line, hacer cola. How would you say I had to stand in line? Tuve que hacer cola. For an hour would be por una hora. Por una hora. Now say this. Yesterday, I had to stand in line for an hour. Ayer tuve que hacer cola por una hora. The supermarket in Spanish is el supermercado, but very often they will shorten this to simply el super. El super. And to express in the supermarket or at the supermarket, it's the same thing in Spanish. They use the pronoun of en el super. How would you say, yesterday I had to stand in line for an hour at the supermarket? Ayer tuve que hacer cola por una hora en el super. Once again, what's the sound for I was? Estaba. So how would you say I was in the supermarket? Estaba en el super. Now try this. I was in the supermarket and I had to stand in line for an hour. Estaba en el super y tuve que hacer cola por una hora. To express for a long time, you will say por mucho tiempo. So for much time, for a long time, por mucho tiempo. Try this. I had to stand in line for a long time yesterday. Tuve que hacer cola por mucho tiempo ayer. To express there was or there were, it's the same sound in Spanish. Simply había, había. And to express a lot of people, it would be mucha gente. The word gente in Spanish is classified as a feminine word, la gente. This is why you get mucha gente. So the mucha matches the la. We can put two examples side by side. So we have mucho tiempo because it's el tiempo. So mucho tiempo, a long time, a lot of time. But mucha gente. So don't forget, when it's gente, it's mucha. How would you say there were a lot of people? Había mucha gente. Let's try something longer. There were a lot of people, and I had to stand in line for a long time. Había mucha gente y tuve que hacer cola por mucho tiempo. Do you remember how to express I couldn't or I wasn't able to? No pude. And what about the verb to stay, meaning to remain myself? Quedarme. So how would you say, I wanted to stay, but I couldn't. I had to go out. Quería quedarme, pero no pude. Tuve que salir. To express I went, the sound is fui, fui. And do you remember how to say the supermarket? El super. To express to the supermarket, it's simply al super. Al super. So how would you say I went to the supermarket? Fui al super. The word for day is día, día. And the day is el día. Normally, nouns that end in an A will have la. However, this is one of the exceptions. So it's never la día, but always el día. To express the other day, it would be el otro día. El otro día. So how would you say, the other day I went to the supermarket? El otro día fui al súper. Now, saying that you bumped into somebody or someone is a very common expression and a common experience, meaning I bumped into somebody by chance. In Spanish, you express this with me encontré con. Me encontré con. This encontré is coming from the verb encontrar, which means to find. So literally what you are saying is, I found myself with whoever it was. Me encontré con. Let's imagine it's Pablo. So how would you say, I bumped into Pablo? Me encontré con Pablo. Now try this. The other day, I bumped into Pablo. El otro día me encontré con Pablo. Let's extend it even more. The other day, I went to the supermarket and I bumped into Pablo. El otro día fui al súper y me encontré con Pablo. The verb to chat in Spanish is platicar. Platicar. And to express with him would be con él. Con él. How would you say to chat with him? Platicar con él. What about I wanted to chat with him? Quería platicar con él. I wanted to chat more with him. Quería platicar más con él. If we wanted to express I was in a hurry, can you remember what the word was for hurry? Apurado or apurada. So how would you say I was in a hurry? Estaba apurado or apurada. Now let's try this. I wanted to chat more with him, but I was in a hurry. Quería platicar más con él, pero estaba apurado o apurada. The verb to go is simply ir, spelled I-R, ir. And a little bit of magic happens when you add on the pronoun of me to that sound. So you take ir and you add me. The sound becomes irme, which means to leave. So on one side you have the verb ir, to go, but irme means to leave. Once again, what's the sound for I had to? Tuve que. And how would you say I had to go? Tuve que ir. Now say I had to leave. Tuve que irme. Try this. I wanted to chat more with him, but I was in a hurry and I had to leave. Quería platicar más con él, pero estaba apurado o apurada y tuve que irme. What about the other day I went to the supermarket? El otro día fui al súper. I bumped into Pablo. Me encontré con Pablo. Now let's try something really long. The other day, I went to the supermarket and I bumped into Pablo. I wanted to chat more with him, but I was in a hurry and I had to leave. Just pause it and think it out step by step. El otro día fui al súper y me encontré con Pablo. Quería platicar más con él, pero estaba apurado o apurada y tuve que irme. How would you say I wanted to go? Quería ir. I wanted to leave. Quería irme. I couldn't go. No pude ir. I couldn't leave. No pude irme. What about I had to go? Tuve que ir. I had to leave. Tuve que irme. Do you remember the verb to stay, meaning to remain myself? Quedarme. And what about a little longer or a little more? Un poquito más. Now say, I wanted to stay a little longer and chat with him. Quería quedarme un poquito más y platicar con él. A curious thing happens in Spanish with the angle of we. So we have both the present tense and the past tense, in this case the preterite, having the same sound when it comes to regular AR verbs. So, for example, the verb to speak is hablar, hablar, and we speak, meaning in the present tense, becomes hablamos. So we have that gorgeous mos sound at the end, hablamos. However, to express we spoke, so this is the preterite tense, but we get the same sound in Spanish. It's hablamos. So we speak, hablamos. We spoke, hablamos. It's normally clear in the context of the conversation which one you mean. Do you remember how to say a little? Un poquito. You could also say un poco, but let's stick with un poquito. How would you say we spoke a little? Hablamos un poquito. A friend in Spanish can be either un amigo, if it's a male friend, or una amiga, if it's a female friend. Let's imagine that it's a female friend for this next one. So we have, yesterday, I bumped into a friend and we spoke a little. Ayer me encontré con una amiga y hablamos un poquito. To express and then, you do this by y luego, y luego. How would you say, we spoke a little and then I had to leave? Hablamos un poquito y luego tuve que irme. The bank in Spanish is el banco, el banco. And to say at the bank would be en el banco, en el banco. How would you say, the other day I bumped into Maria at the bank? El otro día me encontré con María en el banco. We spoke a little. Hablamos un poquito, but I couldn't stay. Pero no pude quedarme, because I was in a hurry. porque estaba apurado o apurada, and I had to leave. Y tuve que irme. Now let's try it all on one slide. The other day, I bumped into Maria at the bank, and we spoke a little, but I couldn't stay because I was in a hurry and I had to leave. El otro día me encontré con María y hablamos un poquito, pero no pude quedarme porque estaba apurado o apurada y tuve que irme.